Hello, and welcome to Feedback episode number 25. Today, we're joined by Zosha DiCastri and Erica Scheinberg, and we'll be talking about Zosha's piece, Tachitipo, featured in her 2019 album release. And don't forget, you can always send questions ahead of time to feedback@yarnwire.org, or join the live chat on YouTube or Facebook to submit questions in real time. So I kind of knew I would mispronounce that as soon as I saw it. I think we'll get enough practice in today.
Tachitipo.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
All right. Yeah. Let's just get started with the way we often do, with a general question about your collaboration, Zosha, with the members of Yarn Wire, how you all connected originally, and the process of commissioning the work, planning and rehearsing the work, and the premiere at Miller Theater.
Sure, great. Yeah, it's wonderful to be here with y'all. I'm trying to remember when we first met. I think that I might have worked with you guys individually through different ensembles like Wet Ink and other freelance gigs around the city before we actually worked together on this piece. Does anyone else remember?
I remember there was a Wet Ink concert, Zosha, where you and me and Eric, and I can't remember who the fourth piano, there were like four piano parts.
Yeah.
Ian, do you remember what piece that was?
I don't remember.
It was an Ablinger concert, wasn't it?
Yeah,
I think I remember playing your piece Cortege.
And you played Cortege, yeah. But I think before that I performed, yeah, you're right, I performed with you.
Yes. Yeah. I was introduced to the Meinl spark shaker.
Oh, right.
Yeah, which is an oboe part, I believe.
Right. The oboist maybe skirted
that
it.
Meinl spark shaker really made it through like Columbia University. I remember people.
That.
Hey, sounds great.
Yeah, highly recommend.
And then at what point did you all plan this collaboration that ended up being Tachitipo?
I think, Russell, you came to me and you had said you had spoken with Melissa
Oh
at
yeah.
Miller Theater about the possibility of doing a portrait concert and whether I would be interested in writing. I think that's how it started.
It must have been that, but it also feels like
Zosha had been on our list for a while.
and that you're on the list, but also like some
been on
list.
our
It's a
list.
secret list in this mess of stuff back here. Or like
Like Santa.
or
Not
like
yours.
but it feels like I've known you forever. Or like
Glad
we've
you
been
feel that way.
or we've been in New York forever, and so like
Yeah.
it felt like it was like
Yeah, we overlapped.
bound to happen or something. But yeah, I think the
Yeah.
Miller thing, the Miller commission was the excuse.
And
That
at
started
that-
it, and
Oh,
then
no, go ahead.
I think together we applied for a Canada Council grant to help
That's
support
right.
the piece.
That's right.
At that point, were you already teaching at Columbia as a member of the faculty, or were you still a grad student?
I think at the time I started teaching in fall of 2014.
Yeah.
And the performance was in 2016, so it was probably 2015-ish when we started bouncing around the idea, maybe even earlier.
It's so weird because I see the date on that piece, like 2016. I'm like, there's no way that was 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Like it seems like maybe it was like last fall,
I know.
Yeah.
Was it in the fall of 2016?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But
And-
you guys have continued to play it and record it, so I feel like it feels closer than it was.
That's true.
That's true.
What was the process like of collaborating on the piece? Did you meet several times and sort of talk through things? Or were you working kind of independently and then checking in with them?
I remember you came to our studio a bunch.
Yeah, at least
of
once
times.
or twice. I think we did a couple workshops together.
Yeah. I remember
And
David
that-
bringing like gear, like microphones,
Yeah, it's
and
a
then
hard
recording.
thing to do back with the keyboard and
Yeah.
no, that was really helpful to do some sketches and get you guys to play. And then I think maybe even more helpful than the sketches was the more improv based things. Like when you guys pulled out the bass drum and we tried different sounds and you were showing me the instruments that you had in the studio, that gave me a lot of ideas.
Yeah.
I think at the first workshop, I knew that I was interested in doing something with the idea of typewriters. And then Ning and Laura were showing me different piano preparation techniques that they thought might blend well with those sounds. At that point, I don't think I had bought in the typewriter, but I had some sound samples or recordings I was playing, and you guys were trying to find sounds that would match. And the percussion guys were playing different wood blocks and various, I think that's when we started exploring with the guiros. So we were kind of building up our vocabulary of instruments and sounds, and then from there I was able to do more on my own end. Since I'm a pianist, I was able to, I spent a lot of time improvising and recording and then bring it into Logic and working, and I was able to work on the piano part that way, but I had to rely more on Ian and Russell to help me with the percussion.
We have a video of
that's what I was
of one of those earlier ones. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So right.
Such gems.
Yeah.
What point you said you knew you wanted to compose a piece that was about the typewriter? At what point do you remember when you started really thinking about the sounds of the typewriter and how you were going to evoke them with the different instruments?
I think that idea came pretty early on. Maybe the different layers of what that might mean came later, the more I wrote and the more material that was developed. But I think that first workshop that I came to your studio at, I had at least, 5 or 10 samples of typewriter sounds, and that was kind of a starting point, was seeing what could be matched to that. And then I thought that could be interesting sort of basic syntax to build up, both for the piano and the percussion, that there were sort of similarities there that could bring the two worlds together.
Mm-hmm.
I have a quick question, Zosha, actually.
Yeah.
When, and I don't remember the process, when did you guys decide to add, well, for those of you who don't know this, which is the entire audience, we have a click track for this piece to help us through some of the stuff. When did you decide to put that into it? Because I don't think I remembered, in those early workshops that we even discussed those elements.
Yeah, I think as I realized that there would be movement around stage, like the piece has different stations that the performers, especially the percussionists, have to move to and from. The pianists are a little bit more grounded just because of the nature of the instrument, but even the pianists play some percussion instruments and have to shift where they're positioned. So I was trying to think about, how much needed to be notated, what could be free, and then if you were not in front of music, whether that would have to be memorized or if there's something I could do to help those transitions in and out, especially when we started talking about using lighting in the Miller Theater performance, where we have moments where it's near blackout or moments where it's very bright. So that was one way of coordinating everybody. And it's not consistent throughout the piece. Like I wanted to be sensitive to the fact that it can be sort of frustrating as a performer to have a metronome in your ear the entire time. The piece is 24 minutes long, that it would get really tedious. So there's some passages where I don't think there's any click at all. There's other passages that lock in. There's these sort of more mechanical, very metrically driven passages. Those ones there's click track for. And then there's other ones where it's my voice giving them instructions, which I felt a little self-conscious about.
No, but it fits perfectly, right, with the theme of the piece. I am so struck by that, because that's not something that you understand as you're just listening to a recording. And when I learned that was part of it, I was so struck by how the theme of dictation is built into the piece, right? And then you're literally the composer, like whispering instructions in the ears of the performers. I wonder if we could talk about the program, because you have included such a beautiful and eloquent and evocative program note. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but there were some passages that I wanted to draw attention to. You wrote, "This piece is a reflection on writing and the machines we use to execute our ideas." In this case, the machines, well, you're talking about the typewriter on the one hand, but also it seems inevitable that you're talking about the piano as a machine, about all of these percussion instruments as machines, and positioning the performers as a kind of medium through which you're expressing your ideas. So I love the idea that you're writing the piece, but also kind of speaking directly to them. But then you also are very explicit about the way that you're expressing ideas about the piano as gendered and the typewriter as gendered, and you're sort of reflecting on your own position as a composer. And I would love for us to talk about these elements of the piece. You write, although taking up typing may have been an emancipatory act for women, in particular in the 19th and early 20th centuries, it is interesting that though given the tools for writing, women at this time rarely held the power behind the signs they were producing. And so that's something else that you seem to be explicitly enacting in this piece, is giving, well, the women of Yarn Wire in particular, some moments of being empowered to express themselves through improvisation. And I wonder also for yourself as a pianist, if you're also sort of staging your own musicking through this piece, if you see yourself in that role. I don't know, I've just sort of raised a couple of questions here. Go in whichever direction you want with all of this.
No, it's good. Yeah, there's a lot to talk about. I guess with the idea of the machines that you were talking about, definitely, the piano can be seen as one of those ways. But I think for myself, I was also thinking at the time about how the different technologies that I use while I compose might be affecting the kind of music that I was writing. Originally I moved away from just paper and pencil and gradually started doing more and more, mainly using Logic Pro, which is kind of like GarageBand for anyone who knows that software, to mock up the sounds, to be able to hear them as I was composing and interact directly with the sound. And that was really liberating for me when I first started doing that. I thought, it opened certain doors for me compositionally. But then there was a point where I was sort of seeing certain patterns in my writing, or I found myself not writing things that I couldn't mock up because I would be worried. I think I went to Logic thinking that, it'll take some of the angst out of composing, because if I can hear it, then I know it'll work musically. But then when I found that I was not writing things that I couldn't, or I could imagine it, but if I didn't know that I could recreate it on the computer, that I would sort of stop myself. So it was around this time I was really thinking a lot about that, how it was both a tool that was helping me, but maybe also cornering me into writing in a certain way. Mm-hmm. And in this piece, I guess it went through lots of back and forth between, sketches, which were often more almost looking like storyboard sketches that you would see for, film or theater. And then going to the piano and being more active, improvising again, and then using the computer. So it's kind of intersecting with those tools, but trying to be more conscious about how they might be affecting me. And I'll say also with piano, I have a degree in piano performance. I've played piano since I was 3.5, I started. But after doing that performance degree, I kind of distanced myself from the instrument. And I wrote one piece for solo piano when I was, 18 years old, I think. And then since then didn't write for the instrument in a solo capacity for a really long time until I wrote Dukes, which was written near the same time as this piece. And I think part of that was I felt, because it was my instrument, that I'd always sort of fall into these same patterns that my hands would go to, mm-hmm. in a way that it wouldn't happen in my chamber music or my orchestral music. So I guess this idea of the piano as a tool was also on my mind, how to try to liberate myself from those influences that were just really like ingrained in my own body.
And you enact so much of the physical work, labor, performance in this piece, right? There's this theatrical element that is, again, not captured on the recording, but is, my understanding is that it's such an important part of your concept of the work, having to do maybe not with, maybe we don't see the muscle memory, but you are thinking about the piano as something that is physically played, is mm-hmm. hunched over in some cases, mm-hmm. right? And there are ways in which you're positioning the musicians' bodies that make me think, or I guess illuminate the ways that you're thinking about the piano as a machine and as an instrument that is physically played, as opposed to some sort of abstract thing that produces sound.
Right, yeah. And to get back to what you were saying before about gender, I think because I knew I was writing for Yarn Wire for these particular players, it struck me that we had the two pianists were women, and two percussionists were men, and just visually thinking about what that was going to look like on stage and how that might play out was sort of a starting point for, I guess, the more theatrical side of the piece. And I think after meeting you guys and working more as a group and sensing your dynamic, I felt that was something we could explore together, that you were all open to that. 'Cause sometimes you get performers where one person in the group is game and the other people are super uncomfortable and it just looks awkward to watch. But I felt like I had a license to explore that. Yeah, I'm not, and it was interesting too, because at the premiere, Ning was pregnant, so I felt like that added another dimension to the visuals of the piece, seeing a woman on a push cart with a headlamp playing the typewriter and being wheeled around stage. It had a certain poetic imagery.
Yeah. Laura, can you talk a little bit about your experience?
Where do I start? For me, part of it, I think, has to do really enjoy the way that she has incorporated, like we were talking about, that agency that she gives to both Ning and I in aspects of the piece that are more open or improvisational. And I also things in some ways, or it's easy for pianists to become cut off because we're in creative ways to sort of break us away from that. And when we were talking just before this, I was thinking about, like, my favorite moment of the piece is the sort of very last moments that I'm at the piano, and Zosha's instructions. Essentially, you know, I'm like putting this in my own words, I become like more and more wizened as I'm playing, like I'm like shrinking into this tiny ball, but then I like escape, you know, and I leave the stage. And this is before, you know, the carts and the typewriter makes its official, like, mobile debut, I guess, at near the end of the piece. But yeah, I think that, I don't know. Yeah, there's this like really tactile experience of playing this piece. That's a great picture. I think we were instructed. We were led for this photo a little bit.
This is during the recording session.
This is from the recording session. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I feel like every aspect of what I enjoy about being a musician who plays contemporary or new music, whatever you want, unusual.
Yeah, I mean, freed from that position at the keyboard, mm-hmm. that typical position, you know, the position associated with, and have always played the piano in the public sphere. Teenage girls in particular, you know, as you're writing in the program, beautiful music for company and behind the instrument, and moving into some other, you know, a way in which and again, I wish I could have seen this piece performed live, but between watching the musicians play and then the blackout, purely aural experience, which in many cases is an experience of electronic sounds that are not produced by the instruments on stage. Yeah. So, yeah.
The electronics have different functions. At certain moments, they reinforce what the musicians are doing. Other times, they provide more microtonal extension of the piano, for instance. So the keyboard sometimes is used to trigger sound files, but sometimes it has a patch where it's playing in quarter tones, so that it blends with the live piano, and there's a speaker under the piano, so it creates a more holistic sound. And that was a way for me to, again, get away from these patterns that my hands would fall into, but have more connection also with the sort of gong world that the percussions sometimes inhabit. And then sometimes, like you said, it can be a more abstract moment that allows people to get from one place to another, or to have a more sort of fantastical soundscape that I can't completely do with just instruments. So I think that, yeah, it serves different functions at different points in the piece.
I think if we could, maybe this is a good time to sort of go through the piece and talk about some of the sounds and some of the moments. I know we have a lot of sound clips queued up. At the very beginning, it seems that one of the things that we hear is the MIDI keyboard actually triggering percussion sounds. Is that right?
They're kind of a mix of percussion and typewriter sounds, like very short sounds. Yeah.
So
with the percussionist playing mainly guiro and woodblock, I believe. It's been a while. You guys would know better.
So many guiros.
Yeah.
And one thing you've written about is, and I think we'll talk about this a bit later, maybe in more depth, but just how you're using the medium of the studio recording to kind of revisit the work and think about things. But one thing, when we listened to the very, very beginning, I was struck by how close mic'd all the sounds are and how close you feel to the sound. I know that was something that you were thinking about. So what I would like to suggest as we're going forward is that maybe we'll kind of talk through this 24-minute piece in order, and you all can kind of walk us through the piece, all the different sounds, the different tableau, and what we would see on the stage. So if we could get that first excerpt up now. This is the very beginning of the piece. How are you using lighting throughout this piece?
Well, maybe it's worth saying that it's been done in different versions. So the first time at Miller Theater, we had the possibility of stage lighting, and we all decided that we thought it would help with the theatrics of the piece to highlight these different zones as we progress through the piece, and then also to make sure people are visible in different ways. So that was, an idea I had fairly early on, but Yarn Noir has also performed this piece at university settings, or we did a performance at America Society, which was in a kind of elaborate salon,
very elegant room
with glass chandeliers and things. So it changes for each performance, and I think that's also a fun part of the collaboration, is rethinking, okay, how can we make it work in this space, or what do we have access to if we're on tour, or, if we don't have the carts, what could we do to move the pianists? That has been an interesting conversation. But at the beginning, this one, the idea was that they'd have the percussionists on either end of the stage, and the electronics are panned very hard left, hard right, especially in the recording. We tried to situate that way, and that there's a very long reverb, a very kind of artificial sounding reverb.
Yeah, definitely get that from listening. But when I was looking at the score and then listening along to the recording, I was struck by this disconnect between like the keyboard and then the sounds. And that also seemed to reinforce to me this idea, in your program note about women typists typing and just taking down whatever it is kind of automatically, kind of going through these motions. It seems to be, those ideas seem to be built into the piece on so many different levels. Can we move on now to section 2? We'll hear 2 excerpts. You're kind of juxtaposing the flowing passages with the machine music. So let's listen to section 2 now. And that,
awesome.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, Laura makes it sound so easy.
Well, that's because you wrote in the score like improvisatory, so I was really just kind of like letting it flow.
the quarter tones are so interesting also there. It really has this kind of really intriguing, distorted funhouse mirror kind of feel. I just love those passages. And then you're contrasting.
Yep. Nice.
I love that part.
Yeah.
I wish we had a video of that because you'd see Ian go like, whoa,
Boom.
with his giant hammer.
Yeah, a lot of fun to play.
Well, what does this section evoke for you all as you're listening to it now? I mean, do you remember what it felt like to play it, or are you thinking more abstractly about what it sounds like?
Both.
It's always felt like we're in a cartoon or like an George Antile thing. Like, to me, I'm just like, oh, here we go. We're in the, you know.
A little bit of ballet mécanique.
Yeah, it's totally,
yeah,
completely.
And what you want to say more about? What did you say? A cartoon, like a cartoon factory?
Yeah, like you know, like the old like Looney Tunes. You know, it's like where it was all very scored, and a lot of woodblock and xylophone sounds and like brash percussion hits. You know, because people are crashing into walls. You know.
I think when I was writing this, I was thinking also like the flowing part. Although it says quasi-improvisatory, it's actually very written out in that passage. That there's an act there of in improvising and finding the music of transcription happening, where then I'd have to say like, okay, how can I now make this so that Ning or Laura could play it? Which again, to me, tied back to these ideas we were talking about before. And then in the machine music, it's more sort of about production and especially since
it's more like player piano-esque,
right? Yeah.
Right. Thoughts about this section?
I remember one of the things was with Laura and Ning, you guys figuring out how to get the preparation in and out in time for these switches. That was like an interesting challenge.
Can you talk about with the preparation?
Totally, yeah. And I remember we sort of devised something so we could install and disinstall the preparation. It's put on and take off really, really quickly. And it's such a great sound, and it's and it's such a great sound. So you get that little bit of pitch, but also that nice knocking wooden sound that actually it's kind of hard to get with any other muting. It's not as consistent. Very, very high end sounds. Yeah, the sort of that last typewriter passage at the piano that I was talking about before, I think that's
automatons, like just executing the interlocking patterns and like staying precisely together with the click track, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting contrast. And I think it sort of enacts the way that throughout the work you get the kind of exterior or external pressure to sort of conform, and then the escaping out of that in all these different passages. Can we talk about the blackout and the electronics that follow these sections? Let's listen and see some images of what happens next. what we're seeing and hearing in this section of the piece.
Lighting in the premiere faded to black or near black. And I wanted to make sure that the pianists also had a chance to move around a bit too, that it wasn't just the percussionists that were doing all the moving. Like Laura was saying, it can be kind of stationary. And so I actually had asked the pianists to play bull roars, and that was slightly lit, but they had to have time to move away from the keyboards, pick up their instruments. And the bull roar instrument, if you've never seen one before, they're kind of theatrical in that they are whipped around in space, and you get like these sort of arc action. And then at that point, so it's also a little bit of a break for the musicians, because for 24 minutes, and after all that mechanical intensity, it was kind of a moment to regroup. And I knew formally that I wanted a very, very big build, and I needed to kind of come down in order to be able to do that. So it served different purposes, I guess, practical and also musical or formal, in order to control the energy over a larger trajectory.
So we do see then Ian and Russell, and this instrument, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like so we see this.
That's actually the girls doing that, Ning
Oh,
and Laura, and then Ian and Russell eventually they're playing the rototoms, and then they pick up the Waldteufel, which has a similar quality, but it's a very different timbre.
It's always
that
the
was all Russell.
Everybody's, are you the source of all the Waldteufel?
They are.
It might be here, yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get silkscreen T-shirts for Ian and Russell that say Waldteufel forever.
100%, yes. It's so interesting because listening it is hard. It was hard for me. Like, I've heard all these sounds, but it was still hard for me to hear what were electronically produced sounds and what were these sounds produced by all these instruments on the stage. I think that would have been clearer in some respects, right, to an audience who was present. But it's really interesting how unclear that is maybe to a listener.
And some of it refers back to like the beginning of the piece. I think at the beginning of the excerpt that you played, I had stretched Guiro samples that like doka 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 doka. That was sort of referring back to the opening session. So
yeah,
that's cool.
And can you talk just a little bit more about your choices, at least at the premiere with the lighting, why it was important for it to be dark, or why you made that decision?
I think part of it is it can look a little utilitarian to be like, okay, leaving the piano, walking over here, picking up the instrument. So it made it more moody and sort of purposefully kind of going to this new direction. But yeah, part of it was practical, leaving the stations, because the part before that, all the performers are kind of congregated together towards the center of the stage. And then I had the rototoms at the very close to the lip of the stage, so they had to come forward and sort of switch positions and mallets, and the women had to kind of get out from behind all the keyboards. So, yeah.
I feel like, the lighting, I think in the piece maybe you refer to things as scenes. Is that right? Am I remembering? And the lighting, like, I think helps at myself, but also an audience, I think, like, structurally through the piece, because everything really does look different, and the music is so different in each section. So like, I think it's a really amazing way to convey these things to the audience, and having played it in different circumstances, the piece does work without it. It's orally very interesting, and it's really cool to see us perform it, but I think with the lighting, it's just a whole other thing, and I almost don't want to play it unless we have the lighting. That's not a very good thing to say, because like it's not practical exactly, but given the chance, I would, do you want to put lighting or not? I would be like, this needs to have lighting.
I think
it's
the
just
word
so
in the score
special.
is tableau.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we should move on, because we have still so many more things to talk about, and we are definitely getting close to running out of time here. But I want to talk about section 6, which is the steady build. This is an important section of the work. Let's listen. Zosha, can we talk about how you've written improvisation into the score in this section?
Yeah, I was just thinking actually I should probably revise the score and looking at all this. But yeah, this is maybe sort of combining. So for the pianist, I use box notation where they have collections of pitches, but they can kind of do it freely. And the percussionist, basically, I think we decided to kind of ignore the score. Like once they understood the idea that I was after, and that it had to build, and that it had to get more and more active. What was on the score is really not that important, as long as they can end when the pianists end to get the big climactic moment. But yeah, it has just this kind of inevitable linear quality, I think, in this trajectory. I don't know if you guys remember for the rototoms how we came to that.
I think it was
Yeah.
just through performance. I thought what you wrote was, we did it, or what you wrote. This is what you wrote, but in the score, as you say, like
Yeah.
when we played it, and I feel like we probably weren't able to get the same motion or energy, and so then and also for staging, I think we thought having music stands there would be kind of a drag. And so, we got rid of the music stands and were able to follow their part, through the cues and whatever, and follow their part and build it better. Because I think a lot of what you wrote is Ian and I playing off of each other also, and so there's this communication aspect. And if there's a scorer mediating that can kind of take away from that. So we were able to kind of cue into each other better.
Do you play this section quite differently, or have you played this section quite differently from what we hear on the recording?
I think it probably roughly follows the same shape, although I know we sometimes struggle with like getting too loud too soon just out of excitement. And I think we ended up moving the rototoms to the back of the stage eventually to kind of like not be in the audience's face.
Yeah.
I think.
It's kind of a balance. It's a
configuration
balance
thing.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually have a question also about in the next section, the nail chimes. In one of the images, you have them at the back of the stage. Were they at the back or at the front? Did that switch at some point?
I think in my first sketches it was going to be in the front, but then for practical reasons, it ended up being behind the piano, and then it looked nice. Like especially Miller, they were able to light it. I mean, the main thing is I wanted her to be visible when she played that, but I think because of how they hung it, they actually hung it the way you would hang a set piece. So it was suspended. It wasn't on a stand, which was nice, both sonically and visually. Then it had this aspect of her sort of reaching up towards this curtain of nails.
Yeah, let's listen to that section. That last picture, we got to see the nails. Zosha, do you want to talk about just how you were thinking about these nails and how you were thinking about these sounds in the context of the piece?
Yeah, I think that this moment in particular in the piece sort of changed for me as I was writing that. At the beginning, it was really just coming to it purely sonically, that I liked the sound of, I was experimenting with cutlery and with nails and figuring out something that sounded cool. And then I thought it looked visually interesting, but I hadn't fully thought of all the different meanings of it. And as I was composing the piece, this was right around the time of the 2016 election. And we all thought it was going to go one way, and it really did not. And I think also just leading up to the final weeks, there was that tape that was released, and I thought, oh, for sure, this is going to do him in. It's not going to. How could people elect a president that would say something like that about women? And then, of course, being really shattered when I found out that I'm not American, but I live here, So that somehow started to take on a different significance for me. I started thinking about, we talk about the glass ceiling with women and this image, especially of Ning pregnant, reaching up and this like celestial sound, but then also the image of touching nails, which is kind of has a contradictory feeling to it, sort of the fragility of it, the danger of it. All of that became, I found that I felt very emotional actually in the first performance at that moment, because it sort of struck me all of those things. And at the time my daughter was 1 year old, and I thought this would be this, moment of celebration. And in fact, I don't know, it's interesting too the way we staged it, because the men, you guys were walking freely around with your instruments. And I think when we did it, Laura, you kind of disappear. Mm-hmm. And then Ning is kind of frozen with her arms up in the air like that. So it took on a different significance for me. I'm not sure for the performers how they feel about that. But.
Well, I think in the score, I think you even write like stand up like on your toes to reach high above your head. Is that right? Is that?
I don't remember. I have to go back.
But there was something very specific about that, about the gesture, about Ning being as tall and reaching upward as far as she could go. And the idea, of the celestial, like reaching for the stars, it's all sort of written into the piece. So there's so many meanings. Also the ocean waves or the wind. Can you talk just a little bit about that? Sort of how you hear that now listening to the piece in that section?
I'm not sure actually. I hadn't thought, I think I was going for something sort of more environmental, or just sort of these washes of sands, but especially after such a huge accumulation of density and activity, that I felt like we needed something just to kind of clear everything out. But I'm not sure what that felt like performing, if it had a different significance for the pianist. I think also because they have this motion going and going and going, and then finally it opens up and it becomes much more sort of spacious and calm. I think you play that part, right, Laura?
I think so, yeah.
Before the nail chimes, the piano stuff.
Oh, right, yeah. I think we're both. I would have to look exactly at the score to remember it. There are some parts of the piece where that click, when time sort of stops, that in my mind are sort of blurry a little bit. I don't know why. That may be because I'm not following a score as closely as I am in other parts of the piece. But also, I just wanted to add, sort of on Ning's behalf, since she's not here with us, it's a little bit delayed, but we were talking about the nail chimes, and I think that one thing that was also made that visually so effective in that part was Ning says she was standing on there was a platform that we put for her, so that she would help be visible. And I also remember experience.
Everything is a technology. A pen is a technology, a pencil, right? And so you're thinking about technology in all these ways, but positioning programmatically this kind of antiquated technology and really making us think about its sounds. And there are so many ways in which the piece is about machines and technology and typing and keyboards and all that. But then we finally, at the very end, see the emergence of the instrument itself on the stage, right? So can you sort of set the stage for us before we listen? What happens in this very last section?
Do one of you guys want to say? Or I don't know. I feel like I'm dominating here.
No. Well, like you mentioned, Ian and I go off stage, right? We're wandering around aimlessly, playing these triangles.
No doubt. Playing your Waldteufel backstage.
No, and so we wander off stage, and then Ning comes down and joins us. And then the stage goes pretty black. And they sit on these platforms that they built at Miller. And Ning has some castanets. Laura has a typewriter, this one right here. And
show us, turn it around so we can really see it. There we go.
That one. And then and Ian and I have these miners, lights on our heads.
Headlamps.
Headlamps. And so
I think we all did.
Oh, we all did at the premiere.
Did.
That's right.
Yeah.
So the stage is black, and we push them across. And our sole function is to push these carts with Laura and Ning sitting there and performing, and they're playing music, but in our ear, Zosha is like, and stop now. And we're like, "Hurt!" And she says, and go. And then we move. So she's giving us theatrical choreography to do. So there's motions that we do, and Laura and Ning like crouch, or they come up and they do this and that.
We stretch our
and
arms.
Stretch their arms. And that's the end, and we wheel them off. And that's the piece. I mean, it's awesome.
And Laura's actually playing the typewriter.
I am.
Yeah. So
And just
really
like when I
hear
was a
it.
kid, my favorite part is when you get the little ding and you have to return the carriage back.
Yeah.
I think
All
you
right.
guys should auction off the typed text after each
yeah.
performance.
That's a
yes.
great idea.
Well, and that's the thing about, I mean, there are so many things in your program note, but the typewriter it is different than the kinds of technologies that we use for typing now, right? Because it doesn't store information. It doesn't, I mean, except for on a paper, but it also allows like the woman typist to type not in her handwriting, right? To be more anonymous. And the technologies that we use now are so much about being connected, and you write about this, right? That connecting to each other through telecommunications and using keyboards to talk. But the typewriter does these different things. It's like, it is about sort of catching up with the speed of our own thoughts, right? Touch typing and typing very quickly and dictation and all of these things that, I don't know, there's so many parallels, right, to performers performing a composer's music as well. And yet you've managed through this work, especially in the way that the score is not super fixed, and you're doing so much collaboration with the musicians, you've managed to really dismantle some of these hierarchies, it feels like. And yet at the same time, you are whispering in their ears and telling them how to move on the stage. I don't know.
Some of those cues are really loud.
So many things to think about. Let's listen to this final example.
Oh yeah, I forgot in the recording Ning was doubling up the typing on a computer keyboard.
That's right.
Oh, right. Yeah,
It's
it's
still
in
like
the
sound.
recording. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
All right. I think this is probably where we have to end, just looking at the time. Did we get any questions today?
We do not have any questions today, but if anyone is watching this after, feel free to drop it into the comments or the chat anyway, and we'll get to you if we can.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Zosha and Erica, thank you so much for being here. This is awesome.
Thank you. It was a great
For
conversation.
those of you listening, our next episode is on Tuesday, November 24th, and we'll be speaking with Travis LaPlante and John Schaefer. And remember to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss an episode. And to support this project, visit our page on patreon.com, where you can become a patron and receive cool bonus rewards like custom ringtones made by Russell and Laura, bonus playlists by our featured artists,
Like
and
Zosha.
download codes for Yarn Wire Currents and more. Cool. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.